Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the stakeholder call to review the revised draw proposal for the Market Settlement Timeline Initiative. My name is Christina Osborne. I work in Stakeholder Affairs. I'll be facilitating the web conference. Also from the ISO in the room, we have Heather Kelly, Steve Castanelli, James Lynn, who is the the primary presenter, Dan Schonkweiler, Jeremy Malekos, and then Meghna Khatri. So, like I said, James Lynn is the primary presenter. He's going to review the proposal. He's going to talk about the objective and the scope, go over the stakeholder feedback and our responses to that feedback, and then the other elements included in the proposal. And then at the end, I'll go over the next steps. So we are the revised straw proposal phase of the stakeholder process. We did post the revised straw proposal on August 15th. We are going to ask for stakeholders to provide comments on the proposal as well as the call discussion, and I'll go over those details at the end. We are recording the meeting today. We're going to make that recording available out on the initiative webpage, which is located, if you go to the Stay Informed tab on the stakeholder, the ISO website, select stakeholder processes. There you'll find all of the ISO active steps. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to James. By the way, we are going to take questions. We'll kind of pause throughout, take questions. If you do have a question, you could raise your hand by pressing #2. We like to remind everyone to please identify yourself before asking your question. So with that, I'll turn it over to James.
Good morning, everybody. As Christina had stated, I'm going to start by going over the objectives and scope of this initiative as an overview. Then I'm going to address some of the stakeholder comments as well as what our, based upon their feedback, what our revised straw proposal is. I will stop periodically on slides because in order to take questions. But if you find a pertinent point and I have not stopped, feel free to interrupt. I am always willing to answer questions. So all that being said, let's start with the objectives and scope. The whole objective and scope of this initiative is we're trying to reduce market participants' financial exposure by increasing the accuracy of our initial statements, the quality, the timeliness, as well as the accuracy of subsequent recalculation statements by resolving disputes sooner and thus by providing us more timeline in order to resolve those disputes by the next recalculation statement. We also are trying to reduce the ISO and market participants' administrative costs associated with what we consider low-value recalculation efforts. This is a theme. These are themes that go throughout this proposal, and we'll go to stakeholder comments now. Based upon the initial draft proposal, we had several comments provided to us, and thank you very much for those comments. They do help us come up with a more accurate or responsive proposal. The first area of the concern from the stakeholders were that the meter data submittal timeline based upon our initial timeline proposal was too short. It was too compressed in order for our participants to provide quality meter data for that initial statement. The ISO has gone back and we have reevaluated our timelines based upon your feedback, and we'll go into some more details as to what our adjusted timeline is going to be. You requested for a longer dispute period after the initial statement, and we have looked to reevaluate that as well, and we are adjusting the timeline for a longer period for the dispute process. You also had concerns on the elapsed time between required and optional statements. We have, in the paper, we provide further rationale on why the timeline we believe is reasonable, both for the ISO and participants. And in conjunction with this, participants requested a settlement payment calendar to show exactly how these timelines will fall out on the payment calendar. We have provided that as part of the straw proposal. I have not indicated, we're not planning on reviewing that sample payment calendar in this discussion today, but if we need to, we can discuss it at a future date. In addition to these concerns, there were some additional stuff related to other items on the objective of the timeline. First one was request on the estimate of aggregated liability. What is the liability changes associated with this particular initiative? We are performing analysis, and I'll be able to provide you more information when we get the draft final proposal. We do anticipate that it is going to increase, but the level of it we don't believe is significant, but we'll give you more information later. You also requested provide an advisory statement to allow participants to review their financial exposure. We believe that, the ISO believes that the rates and pricing information that's already available is enough for you to be able to calculate your own advisory statement without the ISO publishing an advisory statement. Related to our thresholds, dispute threshold, there was questions on whether or not we can provide justifications for that threshold. We believe that the dispute threshold is a reasonably based threshold. We'll go into materiality of the total dollars, how the placeholder dispute clarification, the fact that the threshold is based on non-placeholder disputes, and we believe it's going to give cost savings both to the ISO and to participants. And then the last comment that was provided or requested was what is implementation details. We do not have any implementation dates at this time. We will address that in future, particularly probably during the implementation process or the rug calls. This is not something we are going to push through quickly. We're going to work with our participants to make sure that both participants and the ISO are ready for this implementation in a timely manner. Based upon this, I'm going to stop here. Is there any other questions based upon the stakeholder feedback that I've outlined?
So if you do have a question, just a reminder to press #2 to raise your hand. And Rita, let me know if anybody enters the queue, please.
We do have a raised hand here.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Caroline with ACES.
Hello, Caroline.
Can you hear? Hi. Regarding the dispute threshold, did anybody comment about sometimes a dispute is submitted not so much that we disagree with the numbers, but we disagree with how our system may be calculating it, and that's a way of getting expert on getting a SME on it to help us understand that how it is working and how it's supposed to work to help our vendors. That's one of my biggest concerns with providing this threshold. Sometimes we need that dispute just to be able to figure out what our system is doing wrong. Otherwise, we don't know. Did anyone address that?
Well, no one that I saw or remember, no one raised that in our comments, but there is several ways in which you can ask that question without actually filing a dispute. You can do a dispute, and during our analysis, if we deny the dispute, we may be able to provide you some guidance upon the specific question you're asking. But if it's a specific question on the calculations, I think it would be best if we use the IMS, the inquiry portion of the city. That way I can potentially write a knowledge article so that I can share that knowledge among all participants instead of just to a particular participant. So I would suggest or prefer you use the inquiry ticket on that so that we can resolve those through the normal process as well.
And then if we also had to have a call to follow up to explain things in more detail, we could also do that based on the inquiry ticket.
Right. And I mean, I know that there are some disputes that we've submitted under $100 that were valid also. So, I mean, it is a concern. You know, $100 doesn't seem like much to the great big ISO, but it can be a fair amount to a small utility, you know. And so just, you know, maybe look at the threshold or something. So, but I can comment on my notes about the city inquiry rather than a dispute. If we really think that's what's happening, I can do that. We can do that.
Okay. And Caroline, I do talk about this a little further in the presentation, and I think that's probably the place to revisit this. So I will be raising it back up at that point.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Any other questions, Rita?
You're welcome.
Any other questions, Rita?
That's all the questions I have right now.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on.
Okay, from here we're going to go into the proposal, and this is a little proposal overview of the topics we're going to discuss. I'm expecting we're going to spend most of our time on the modified settlement timeline based upon stakeholder comments. We did reevaluate and we did modify the settlement timeline. The other two items that we will discuss is the extended flexibility in publishing of settlement statements and weekly invoicing, as well as what we were just discussing, the revenue charge threshold for submitting disputes. So, based upon stakeholders' feedback, we did go and we did look at the feasibility of modifying our timeline from having the initial statement on 7B and moving it to another subsequent day. And based upon the comments and our analysis, 9B seems to be the most optimal solution. So the new proposal is our settlement timeline proposal now is to do the initial statement based upon 9B. It also means we are going to extend the meter data submission timeline from 4B to 7B. This initial statement then does allow us to incorporate all price corrections. We will be able to incorporate the available meter data. That meter data which is not available, we will still have an estimation process. So we will estimate for that information that is not available at that time. And publish on 9B. We will have a subsequent weekly invoices based upon that settlement timeline with a 5 business day payment of those weekly invoices. Based upon the stakeholder input, we've also extended the dispute timeline. The dispute timeline was originally 14 business days, and we are extending it to 22 business days to align with all the other dispute timelines. This does predicate us have a need to move the recalculation statement as well. By adding the additional 8 business days, we are now going to have to move the first recalculation statement from 60B to 70B. So that is a result of both moving the initial statement and extending the dispute timeline. We are proposing to maintain the original proposal of meter data submission of 52B. This is just, you can still submit earlier, but it's 52B would be the cutoff for the 70B statement. We also are proposing to maintain the 12-month, 21-month, and 24-month. We believe that with the 70B recalculation statement, we will need that period in between the 70B and the 12 months to be able to resolve any disputes that potentially will arise. We have compared this, and we've tried to do our due diligence on FERC Order 741. Based upon our due diligence, we believe we have a strong legal argument to support this settlement timeline based upon other RTO and ISO's other timelines, as well as internal discussions on or review of FERC 741. As I stated earlier, we're going to perform some additional analysis on the estimated liability by moving initial statements from 3B to 9B. Yes, there will be some liability changes, but we do not believe it's going to be significant enough, but we provide you more information on that on the draft final. But I do have to, based upon our legal review, do have to caution that FERC may not be as accepting of the move from the 7B to 9B because they may consider this a step back. We don't believe we're going to have a lot of opposition based on our strong legal argument, but FERC could see this as a step back from our current implementation. That was a lot of information I provided, and I'm expecting we're going to have most of our discussions here. So, any questions?
Rita, let me know if anybody interested you.
We do have a few raised hands here.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Hey, this is Caroline again. This is actually something that's been on my mind for quite a while. The invoices that we get currently are dated on a Tuesday, but they actually include settlement data that isn't published until Wednesday, which seems kind of odd. You know, you're getting billed for something that hasn't published yet. Along with this initiative, can we change that so that the invoice date actually matches the publication date of the last statement that's included on it?
Hi, Carolyn. This is Rhonda Faulkner. So what you see is you're actually seeing timestamps of when our settlement processes are occurring. And so what happens is that on Wednesday, we have 3 initials that are being published that are included on that invoice. And so those statements then are validated and confirmed on Tuesday. And once we are okay with the results of those settlements, those initial statements, then we begin our billing and invoicing on Tuesdays. And so before we even start our billing and invoicing processes, we have to confirm that those statements are good. And so what you're seeing are timestamps based upon when we do our processing and not necessarily when things are published.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it does. It's just always seemed really odd that invoices are dated on a Tuesday, but, you know, why can't they be dated for the same day that the statements are published in the calendar?
Right, sure, but correct. But if we do that then, based upon our current design, then you would not get your invoices and statements shortly after midnight on Wednesday. We would have, if you want a timestamp that says Wednesday, then we would have to delay publication. And so that we wouldn't be able to do your billing and invoicing until Wednesday morning, and then you wouldn't get your publications until later on Wednesday, if you want the timestamp.
Okay.
So Caroline,
so it's just an automated thing. It's not like you can put into the system, hey, you know, date it for this day, or it's just an automated date. Correct?
But Caroline, do me a favor and put this in your comments. Maybe it's something that we can look at. And it's, again, since it's a process thing, we may not be able to do anything about it, but at least if you have it in the comments, it gives us an opportunity to go back and look.
And at least explore it, and then in the future when somebody says, hey, why is this, you'll know why.
Exactly.
Okay, I can do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take the next question, Rita.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. It's Josh Arnold from PG&E. How's it going over there today?
All right, Josh, how are you?
Doing all right. Want to talk about the whole EAL exposure and credit risks on this, because I've been thinking about this a lot since the last call, and I'm a little worried on the 9B in that for California participants, at least for PG&E, about 90%, if not more, of our invoices each week are generated solely from the day-ahead market results. We're talking charge code 6011 and to some extent 5301. And I'm concerned that by pushing the initial statement now back further to 9B, that this is going to create a really nasty credit risk or credit hit for the California participants, whose majority of the market is really still the day ahead, which doesn't correlate to meter data. It's not affected by all that. And I'm just wondering if there might be a way to do a small, non-disputable statement that, like 4B, after the day-ahead price corrections, just for those two charge codes, just for 5301, 6011, because they're balanced, because they're such a large part of the CAISO day-ahead, the CAISO participant market, just to get the invoices for those done, still maintaining the spirit of the FERC order from the payment acceleration initiative, and to reduce the credit risk to participants.
Okay. Josh, I hear you. Under the current design of our settlement system, they are extremely linked. This would require a significant configuration changes in our system. So at this time, that does not seem to be a feasible option. However, we are looking for future opportunities to possibly doing this. And I think we have talked about it in the past on stakeholder calls of splitting statements into like TAC versus day ahead versus. So this would, if we were going to do something like that, that would fall in line with that initiative. But if you could please put that in your comments.
Yeah, it would require us to redesign all the charge codes, to tear them apart and put them back together. But it is something we've been discussing internally for a long-term option. So.
Yeah, I'm just remembering back. I mean, I'm assuming you're still using the software that started with MRC, and I'm remembering back that, the day-ahead charge groups all fall under a single parent group, which would just require.
We also feed into expected energy is needed for the day ahead because the expected energy is what drives the day ahead calculations. And also, we will also do when you have ancillary services, they're not tied just to day ahead. They go to real time.
Right, but James, I'm not talking about I'm not talking about ancillary services because that you do want meter data. You do want real time. And you're already calculating.
But Josh, that's what
yeah.
That's what I'm talking about, George. Sorry, Josh. Is that these would have to be, we would have to go through and say what group would have to belong to this day-ahead grouping versus what part of the day-ahead market now has to maintain to the 9B. So this would require a significant amount of analysis and change because we do have a lot of interplay among all of these charge codes. So remember, the day-ahead market isn't just day-ahead energy.
Right. Right. That is true, and I agree with that. My thought, though, is that is still, the vast majority of the money.
I'm not going to disagree with that.
Yeah. And with expected energy being calculated in CMRI, I appreciate the work that would be done. I really do. I'm just putting that out there because otherwise, I'll be honest, otherwise I don't see a problem personally with the timeline you have. I mean, the 9B, it makes sense. People need time to get a good settlement quality meter for their fleet. If that takes to 9B, okay, you need time to process that, put it through. 9B makes sense. 70B, not ideal, but again, with the dispute timeline you've got, the 22 days, you got to have time to resolve stuff, to process stuff. It all makes sense for the required statements. I'm concerned about the credit. I think that's actually a very large issue that needs to be looked at. But thanks.
And that's why we are doing our due diligence to look at it. So yeah, Josh, please put that in your comments, both concerns on liability and your suggestion on the separate statement.
Will do. Thanks.
Any other questions, Rita?
One more here. I apologize. A few more here.
Oh, okay.
Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Susie Niederhorn with MA Energy. James, I just had one question. So for the T+5 price corrections, are you able to apply all the corrections to the T+9 business days? Because you only have 2 days to process all the corrections, and then currently you have 7 days to process all the corrections to the T+12 statements. So that's kind of my concern. So.
Hi, this is Meghna Khatri. We should be able to, we do process our price corrections by 5 business days unless there's a processing error. In that case, you do get a market notice. It's just that the statement's published by 12B, but we have to finish our price correction by 5 business days. So you
guys okay with the 2 days processing time for all the price corrections?
Yes, we believe that it will give us plenty of time to make those price corrections.
You're not planning any of corrections to allocate some corrections to the T+70 business days, because that's really far out. You know, if some big correction, that's my concern. So.
But hi, by tariff, we have to finish our price corrections by 20 business days, even if we run into some processing issues. So if the statement may come out at 60, but the price correction, if for whatever circumstances are delayed and have to use the 20 business day, they will be available on OSS for 20 business days.
Thank you. And also
most of our price corrections are done by 5B today.
Yeah.
We do have some special circumstances that we do have the tariff authority to extend that out to 20B. That tariff authority is still going to be there, but as we stated before, we are expecting to have the majority of all price corrections done by 5B, and only under special circumstances would it go to 70B, and we would let you know that based on our publication of the price correction of these special circumstances.
Thank you. And also that if we have more price corrections after T+9 business days, so we can still file disputes, and then also you guys still going to post, you know, business corrections, publish the price corrections as well, right? The process is going to be the same for the price corrections after the first the statement, initial statement.
We are not proposing to change that, correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next question, Rita.
Hi, this is Jennifer with Idaho Power, and I just had a question about the 7dB. So it looks like you guys extended that to allow the longer dispute deadline to kind of add the additional 8 days. Is there a reason why the statement itself maybe didn't go to 68B, or is it just to kind of round it and make it? I'm just kind of curious about that timeline, because it does push that one out quite a bit.
Right. So by adding the 2 additional business days onto the initial statement and then adding the additional 8 days onto the business days, you basically have added 10 business days. So that, in essence, pushed our recalculation statement out an additional 10 business days. That, in essence, is how we pushed out to 70B. So it's a combination of the 2 extensions.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I really do I appreciate that you guys moved the initial out to the 9B, I think that's will help us, I know, for meter data. So I appreciate that, and I like the changes.
Thanks, Jennifer.
All right. Any other questions, Rita?
We do have one more. Go ahead, please.
Hi, this is Alishan from SCE, and how are you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. I was calling to, or I was raising my hand to reiterate Josh's statements here regarding the estimate aggregate liability. On our side, we've also looked at that, and the sense that we get is if the T3 statement essentially gets pushed to 6 days out, that creates significant amount of risk, credit risk for us. Given the conditions last summer, that would have been a massive amount of credit for us to be able to secure to be able to meet the requirements from the Kaiser's side based on the EAL guidelines that are out there. And you know, we've run some initial back of the envelope numbers, and that shows some close to $600 million worth of credit that we would have had to secure. That seems not very feasible, and I think one of the things that we looked at back from the payment acceleration proposal back in 2008, some of the options that were being proposed by the ISO are exactly similar to the ones that Josh was saying, which is basically bifurcating the day ahead and the real-time charges, even to the extent of just, you know, limiting it to like a 6011 and a 6301, or maybe including CRRs in there, whatever works as a simple way to be able to get the majority of the dollars out up front. If I can quote one of the statements in that proposal was, let's see, it is essentially, it says, for the payment acceleration, it's essential to have this T2 or T3 statement to be able to reduce undue credit risk to market participants. So that's something that I think we're going to include in our comments, and we highly encourage that we take a look at that, not for a long term, but for trying to see if we can bifurcate just at least maybe a 6011 and a 6301 into an initial statement before the 9B comes out, so the credit risk can be mitigated.
Thank you, Alishan. Yeah, please include that in your comments. I look forward to reading those. I understand your concerns, you know, and we are continuing our review of the explicit liability calculations and impact. So, yeah, please include those in your comments.
Will do. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, Rita?
No more questions here.
Okay, so the next two areas of the proposal is not as controversial, I don't believe, but at least the first one isn't, is extending the flexibility of publication of settlement statements and weekly invoicing. We want to add some clarifying tariff language regarding the flexibility in publishing settlement statements and the weekly invoices. And invoices that are considered to be published timely if published after 5 a.m. the following day. In this case, it's Thursdays. For weekly invoices published after 5 a.m. on Thursday, the invoices' due dates will be adjusted to 4 business days from that invoice date. We want to make sure that we have this, you know, we perform this authority now. We just want to add this clarifying language into the tariff itself. Any questions on this particular portion of the initiative?
Let me know if anybody enters the queue, Rita.
We have one raised hand here.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Hey, James. Josh from PG&E again. Looking at this, the only concern I have, with this is if Thursday is not a business day. I'm thinking specifically of Thanksgiving week, where if there's any delay in publication on Wednesday, suddenly we are into a long weekend with multiple non-business days, and I'm worried that throws off the invoice process considerably, especially if this goes through with this language, which would mean that suddenly we would come back on Monday and we'd have a very short period of time to reconcile this invoice.
Well, if Thursday is a holiday, then, and we actually did publish on Wednesday night, your subsequent invoice is 5 business days. Is it 5 business? 4 business days.
Would be Friday the next week.
Right.
I just wanted to make sure we thought through that scenario, because that was one of the reasons we published on Tuesdays, is because Wednesday, it's not typically, there will be business day holidays, but it's not going to ever be those extended breaks like we have at Thanksgiving. That's the one week that would concern me. So I'm just putting that out there. I don't think this is a problem. I'm just putting that out there saying let's make sure we consider it. Thank you.
Well, we did look at it. We have been taking those into consideration, but please include that in your comments, Josh, and we'll revisit that.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions, Rita?
None as of now.
Okay, the next area is probably the next area of discussion is going to be establishing a revenue charge threshold for submitting disputes. Based upon our analysis, we've looked at the approved non-placeholder disputes with values less than $100, and they make up only 0.02% of the overall dollar disputes allocated since 2014. This is not a significant amount of dollars or invoices being settled, but it is a significant amount of cost associated with settling each of this, doing the research, and whether or not it's approved or not approved. So it's approved. We've put a significant amount of effort into it for very little gain. So we believe that by putting a $100 threshold, we're reducing the cost of processing dispute adjustment for small dollars greater than the actual resettlement. So we're looking to be a little cost effective here, both for the ISO and for the participants. So our consideration of the $100 was based upon both internal and external costs.
Also, the average, if you average out per scheduling coordinator for each individual company, the average amount of disputes submitted under $100, if you add everything up, each scheduling coordinator is getting about submitting disputes for about $130 for the entire year. So we get a lot of disputes that are 56 cents and, $27 and $19, $3, 8 cents. We get a lot of those, and the time it takes to actually put the ticket in, provide the data, and submit it is more than the value for the dispute itself. Now, placeholder disputes, so systemic errors that happen over and over and over again, even for whatever dollar amount they are, will still be accepted. So those do not have a dollar threshold. So if something's happening every day, every week, reoccurring over a period of time, those are still accepted, and there's no dollar amount placed on those.
Any questions, Rita?
And that was Heather, by the way.
We do have a couple of questions here. Please go ahead.
Hello again, James. It's Josh. Okay. So I'm going to put this up front. I really do not like the concept that you're introducing here. As we've discussed before, I believe that the CalISO has an obligation to ensure that their settlements are correct and accurate under all conditions. I don't think that the CAISO assigning a CAISO settlement threshold as the end-all, be-all is appropriate because there are costs and impacts beyond that. One example would be contract resolution. And I'm really, really concerned about this because, one, the amount of money to the participants it could be very important. I mean, as Carolyn from Aces Power already points out, I mean, that $100 could be very important to a small participant. And I believe Alice John from SCE comments on that last time. The other side of it is, I mean, there are only really three types of disputes. There's a wrong input, there's a wrong calculation, or someone is confused. If we take, as you suggested earlier, someone is confused, they don't know what's going on, and make that an inquiry ticket, perhaps leading into a dispute, that only leaves us two things, a wrong input and a wrong calculation. If you have a wrong input or a wrong calculation, that's a systemic issue potentially. That's either a payload wasn't done properly, something upstream isn't working right. That's a bug that would need to be fixed. If it's a wrong logical calculation, that's an error in the settlement itself. And sure, there may not be a lot of value to one person in one instance, but if these are bugs, if these are wrong payloads, if these are wrong calculations, that can add up. And, you know, we look back, yes, placeholder disputes will be covered. That's fine. But we look back at the pain it has been over the years. I'm going back to when FERC 764 was introduced, and we had to fight numerous times against the CAISO for the correct application of RIE and performance metrics against VER resources under forecast. And in the end, that was small dollars, every hour, every resource. And obviously it qualified for a placeholder dispute, but it ended up being over $27 million by the time it got corrected. If we don't have enough instances to qualify for a placeholder, these little things can still happen and be massively impactful to the market as a whole. So I'm really, really bothered by this on a foundational level. And I don't think this is appropriate. I really don't think this is appropriate. One other question is, what is the percentage of disputes overall that are under $100? To say it's 0.02% of dollars, well, yeah, it's small stuff. But is it, 50% of all disputes? Is it 25% of all disputes? Because that's really the problem. It's not the dollars that matter in this case. The dollars are necessary for an accurate statement. How many do you have to do? Especially how many that you have to do that really should have been an inquiry ticket. And my thought process here is maybe the problem is your city process for submitting disputes, because that is a really, really bad design. I'm sorry. And maybe the emphasis here should be in redoing that so we can put in more precise details as to what we believe the problem is. Is it an input? Is it a calculation? And if it's not one of those two things, make it be an inquiry ticket that can lead to a dispute. And of course, I'll be putting all this in comments.
Okay. I hear you, Josh. Please, you already anticipated my response, so yeah, please include those in your response to us. I hear you have your fundamental disagreement with this, but most of the scenarios that you were describing would have fallen under the placeholder dispute. If it is a payload error, that would fall under a placeholder dispute. If it was a calculation error, that would fall under a placeholder dispute, because it is a systematic error. But I do hear you, and yeah, please include those in your comments and we'll revisit it.
Do you know how hard it is to get a placeholder dispute, even for something that basic? We have fought with your dispute teams at times over very similar situations where prices were not accurate to OASIS. And we have fought to get placeholder disputes. and they just would not allow it, even though it was a systemic issue day over day. I mean, I'm going to go to the UFE calculations in Northern California for 3 months of last year were millions of dollars a day greater than they should be because of a bad meter data value coming from an intertime meter. Our disputes on that were pretty much rejected and turned away. It was millions of dollars a day. And I'm sure you're aware of this because we've been talking to other people since that happened about how to detect these issues going forward. But, you know, this, I'm going to mute. I'm just going to mute and let somebody else take it.
So, Josh, I don't mean to cut you off, but you know, this could go on for a while. So, yeah, please include this in your dispute, in your comments. I very much appreciate it. And if you want to talk more offline, give me a call.
So, Rita, how many others do we have in the queue?
We have a couple more in the queue.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Hey there, James. This is Alishan, SCE. So you can probably guess I'm echoing Josh here as well. This is I think one of the things I raised my hand for was a question regarding the placeholder disputes, and I think first of all, if this is going to go through this way, if it's allowed on placeholder disputes, that makes me feel a little bit better. But I still go back to kind of the principle of this as well. I look at it as we're in a market just like any other market, like the stock market, and I don't think any of us, if we put our money in investments in the stock market and when they're settling us out, when we're cashing out, and they're like, oh, you know, this is the $100, it's under the threshold, and we're not going to settle with you correctly for that. I don't think any of us would be happy with that kind of a settlement with our stocks. So this market is, definitely fewer players in it, but still the basis of it is the settlements have to be accurate, and we cannot, from a principle perspective, say we're not going to entertain things that are less than a certain threshold. Because again, at this point, we see the $100 as a guideline that CAISO can provide to the market participants and make a suggestion and say, hey, you know, variance is less than $100, maybe increasing the workload and effort that the settlement shop has to do at the CAISO, so consider not putting in disputes, consider putting in IMSs. But I think to put a hard threshold that says, hey, you cannot dispute anything below $100 really isolates smaller players in the market. And I think this doesn't really affect, maybe large players, which don't will see this as a higher value to spend at times otherwise, but it's a fundamentals issue here that is being considered, and I would also suggest that we consider not implementing a threshold and making it more of a guideline or kind of an advisory note that says, try not to dispute anything under $100. And
all right, I hear you. Yeah. Sorry. Good. You got clapping in the background?
You know what? No, we've got all hands here that they're clapping, so let me close the door.
I'll say, wow.
The trade floor was waiting. Sorry about that.
Yeah, please include these in your comments.
Will do.
Thank you. Next question, Rita?
Please go ahead.
Hey, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Hey, this is Matt Richardson at SDG. I got to say, that was pretty funny. I thought Alishan had like a soundtrack back there or something. That was pretty good. What's your timing? Anyway, I'll spare you a tangent, but I would generally say that SDG kind of would echo what Alishan from SCE and Josh were saying at PG&E, that principal disputes, especially for us little guys compared to the other two, matter big time. And I also would be curious what kind of the percentage of overall disputes are the small ones. And it might be a sign that they're really important, because I know there are a lot of them. But I had a kind of a question about how, have you guys considered how you're going to qualify this dollar threshold you're proposing? And let me give you an example. Like, for instance, when you're talking about BCR, BCR, as you know, is a very complex and nuanced charge code. There's, you can dispute many parts of BCR, like the commitment costs. So, like, if, one of our baseload units, we think incorrectly isn't given a, startup cost of $50,000, but it doesn't have an impact to the overall charge code, will we be able to dispute something like that? Or because it doesn't have a net dollar impact on the charge code level, we can't dispute it?
Well, hold on a second. I wanted to think about what your question.
We're going to take a
Hi, I'm back. I had to think about the current dispute process and this. I think the best way to handle that is actually through inquiry ticket, because even if we did agree with that startup cost, running a recalculation statement on that, you're saying, would not result in you actually getting any big cost recovery. So then you're incurring costs that was unnecessary, but if you believe it's a fundamental issue, an inquiry we get is looking into it and resolving it. But that is a very good question that, put that question into your comments and I can think about it further.
Okay, thanks, guys. I apologize if I was not incredibly coherent either in trying to explain that. I would also just be cautious, too, that if you guys do go forward with this, I hope you're anticipating a lot more city inquiries as opposed to disputes, because people are going to want to get their questions answered, if they don't have dollar impacts.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, thank you. That's all I had.
Yeah, we don't want to take away anybody's ability to ask questions or raise issues that they find while they're validating their settlement statements. A lot of times we do get disputes that really should be inquiry tickets, and we do try to correct those when we get them in and educate our customers about that. So we don't want to take that away. We want to continue to have that path open so that people can get their questions answered and point out potential issues even if they don't have settlement impacts. We want to get those resolved.
So,
understood.
And maybe it's a good point that Josh had raised earlier is maybe part of this whole process is to get a better understanding as to when to do city versus inquiry. But yeah, please, include those comments and we'll review them.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Rita?
One more here.
Okay, this is Ali Shan again. I have done away with my applause track at this point. I really want to applaud the SDG Comments here. This is a very important issue that we've faced in the past, the $0 disputes, essentially, especially on BCR. And I can explain that the situation was we chose not to dispute several instances in the past, and later on when there was change in methodology of calculation in the BCR, that dispute, I guess CAISO's response to us was that we should have disputed those instances even though there would have been no material change in the initial outcome of the BCR, because input to the BCR calculation, like the startup cost and other factors, were incorrect, even though it was a $0 net outcome. So that I think it's a huge factor that plays into this, and that essentially those are disputes that would have been denied or essentially that we would have not been allowed to put in. But in this instance, PESO's response to us was that we should have disputed in the first place for us to be able to get it resettled correctly. So an IMS ticket or a city inquiry would not have sufficed in that kind of a situation. I'm not sure how to capture that in comments. I know that's what your response is, James, but it's something that's specific to this scenario that essentially would have said, hey, too bad, you're not going to be able to get these dollars recovered, even though that you're correct in your assessment of it. So, summing that up,
good point.
Summing that up, I think $0 disputes should be allowed exactly because of what SDG is bringing up.
I appreciate you guys are raising good points, and as you've anticipated, I'm going to recommend that you put in our comments so that we have an area to review them and to provide responses to it. But yes, please, I do appreciate the comments you guys are raising now.
Also, if you have any old dispute ticket numbers or city ticket numbers that you're talking about specifically, let us know so that we can research it further.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No further questions right now.
Okay. Well, in summary of our discussions, we have listened to stakeholders regarding the settlement timeline. We have made some modifications to our original proposal. We're looking to move the initial statement to 9B, extending dispute timeline from 14B to 22B, as well as extending the first recalculation statement to 70B. We are continuing to look at the liability concerns. Again, we believe this is, we have a strong legal argument to support our position. And so those are the modifications to the settlement timeline. We're also looking to provide more extended flexibility in publication of settlement statements and weekly invoicing, so we have some tariff clarifications on that. We are planning on, or we're looking to establish a threshold for submitting disputes, but please provide all comments related to these initiatives. In the end, we believe this initiative is going to provide more benefits to our participants as well as ISL. You're going to have more accurate initial settlement statements because those initial settlement statements can be based upon actual meter and not estimated meter. All the day ahead and real-time price corrections will be within the system, and so therefore we will have more accurate settlement. After-the-fact corrections will also be within the settlement system, and therefore the initial statement will have much more accurate value for both our participants to settle up with their third party as well as settle up with the ISO. The first recalculation statement will be more accurate as well because we have provided ourselves a little additional time to receive disputes as well as resolve those disputes. Additional benefits include improves, we believe, certainty for participants on their financial position. There isn't such a huge swing between the initial and recalculation statements. We believe we also are trying to solve processing costs and data storage costs by reducing resettlement frequency. And we're also minimizing resettlement and reducing administrative costs by having a dispute threshold. We believe that we did not receive any comments regarding the status of the Energy Imbalance Governing Board. We believe they hold a proposed advisory role because this initiative generally is applicable to the entire market and not just real time, and it's not driven by the energy imbalance market.
So any questions before we go over the next steps?
No questions as of now.
Okay. So the next steps for stakeholders are, if you could provide written comments, we do encourage you to provide the comments that were discussed on today's call in your written comments and provide as much detail as you can so we can understand the issues. Those are going to be due September 6th. You can submit those to the Initiative Comments mailbox that's linked below at the bottom of the page. And then the next step in the stakeholder process is to publish a draft final proposal. We're going to try to target mid-September to publish that proposal, followed by a stakeholder call a week after it's published, and then we'll ask for stakeholders to provide comments on that proposal as well. And then our intention is to take this to the EIM governing body at the end of October, and then it will go on the it'll go to for approval at the ISO Board of Governors meeting in November. So are there any other questions?
We do have a couple of raised hands here.
Okay.
Go ahead, please. Susie Niederkorn with MA Energy. James, I got one quick question on the page 12. So you're saying that the ATF corrections were not included in current T3? I thought that are included already.
You're thinking of after-fact interchange schedules. Those are estimated for the T3 right now. For things like exceptional dispatches in which we have to go and those are verbal dispatches, and we have to go and insert those into the system. Those do not always make the T3. We try to get those to make the T3, but in many instances they do roll to the T12 statement. With this current proposal, we will have those after-fact adjustments in by the T3.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense, though. Thank you so much, James.
Thanks, Susie.
All right, we'll take the next question, Rita.
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, James, just a couple of times, I think during the presentation, you referred to that you feel there's a strong legal argument for doing this. Could you provide any kind of maybe bullet points on specifically what that legal argument you're referring to exactly, or any more elaboration?
I'm actually going to defer this. Yeah, I'm actually going to defer this to Dan, our legal representative.
Sure. Hi. This is Dan Schonkweiler. Let me sketch this out, and I'm also happy to talk through this with anyone who wants to call me. So Order 741 says that ISOs and RTOs have to have billing periods and settlement periods no longer than 7 days. And it's clear from that order and the order accepting compliance filings that the billing period is how many days get invoiced at once. And that's important because they thought about saying you need to bill 1 day at a time, which would be very frequent bills shortly after the settlement statements were issued. But ultimately concluded, FERC said, no, weekly billing is enough. In the ISO right now, we bill weekly. That wouldn't change. And then you have to have a settlement period 7 days or less. The settlement period is the number of days after invoices the payment is due. Right now it's 4 business days. That wouldn't change under this proposal either. So that's a strong argument. This complies with Order 741. Does that help?
Yeah, that does help. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Rita? Do we have anybody else in the queue, Rita?
Hi, there is one more question. Just give me 1 sec.
Sure.
actually, they just dropped off. No more questions in the queue.
Well, thank you, everyone. We'll look forward to receiving your comments on the 6th of September, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for using AT&T Connect. Your conference is now ended. You may now disconnect.